20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
Wow, would you look at that liftoff? This is real footage taken from the liftoff of the spacecraft Apollo 11 during the space race. What is a space race, you ask?
Space race was a competition that took place in the 20th century against the two Cold War rivals, the United States of America and the Soviet Union. The main goal of this competition was to win the supremacy of space flight capability.
The race started when both countries realized how important rocket research would be to the military. Before any events took place in the competition, America created a space treaty that would settle any future conflicts about space exploration. One of the articles states parties to the treaty shall carry on activities in exploration and use of outer space, including the moon and other celestial bodies, in accordance with the international law, including the Charter of the United Nations, in interest of maintaining international peace and security and promoting international cooperation and understanding. The race officially began in 1955 when both the U.S. and the Soviet Union announced that they would be launching satellites into orbit. The Soviets took the announcement by the U.S. as a challenge, and they established a commission whose goal was to beat the states in putting the satellite into space.
The Soviets took the lead in the race when they launched their satellite called the Sputnik 1 on October 4, 1957. After this event had occurred, American citizens became concerned with when the U.S. would launch their satellite. The Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles, sent the White House Press Secretary, James Hagerty, suggestions for the text of a press release which would place the Sputnik launch in its proper context and reassure the public. While the United States has not given the same priority to outer space developments as has the Soviet Union, it has not neglected this field. It already has the capability to utilize outer space for missiles, and it has expected to launch an Earth satellite during the present geophysical year in accordance with a program which has been under orderly development over the past 2 years. States Dulles in his suggestion that he wrote. The U.S. then launched their first satellite, Explorer 1, 4 months later.
This is a headline of a newspaper that was published in America the day after the Soviets launched Sputnik 1. It talks about how the Soviet success and how the U.S. will plan to speed up the process of launching their first satellite. Laika the dog from Russia was launched into space aboard the USSR Sputnik 2 in November of 1957. To prepare for this journey, they were trained to live aboard and eat a gel diet that was necessary. Laika was never brought back to Earth, and it was never known how long she lived for in orbit. Another dog that was brought into space was Albert 2, who was a monkey, and he would be the second. In this picture, it shows how Albert preparing for his mission. Albert was set into space on June 14, 1949, and he was put under anesthesia, and they watched his vitals through the sensors. Albert unfortunately did not make it home, as he died because of impact during re-entry into Earth.
Yuri Gagarin from Russia became the first man to ever enter space on April 12, 1961, and he flew in the Vostok 1. The Friendship 7 entered into orbit on February 20, 1962. The man inside the ship was named John Glenn, and he became the first American to orbit around the Earth 3 times and traveled 81,000 miles and took him less than 5 hours. This became one of the most important missions to space in American history.
In 1961, President Kennedy went to Congress and announced that he wanted to be the first to put a man on the moon. He gave a speech via technology to the entire country declaring this goal. The exploration of space will go ahead, whether we join it or not, and it is one of the great adventures of all time, and no nation, which expects to be the leader of other nations, can expect to stay behind in the race for space. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard, because that goal will serve an organization to measure our best energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one that we are unwilling to postpone, and one that we intend to win, and others too, said JFK in his Man on the Moon speech.
The Apollo Moon program was established to help this expedition become successful. The Gemini program was also created to develop technology for the Apollo spacecraft and all of the conditions that a man would experience in space. On July 16, 1969, the Apollo 11 spacecraft was launched with the crew of Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins on board. 5, 4, 3, 2 boomed through my ears. I quickly reminded myself what was in my bag, and it included my space helmet, space drink with a space straw, clock, and my gas operators. Therefore, I wouldn't be able to smell the strange odors. Boom, the speed went to 60 miles per hour. The windows were shaking and the seats were rattling. All the best, pronounced Mission Control, who were on the other side of the radio. Our mission, the moon, was waiting to be found. Winning for America was the only thing we could think of, wrote Neil in his journal.
The spacecraft took 3 days to travel to the moon, and on July 20th, 1996, Neil Armstrong became the first man to walk on the moon. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, said Armstrong. However, he made the mistake of saying man instead of a man due to his nerves. This is an actual picture that was taken of Armstrong and Aldrin on the moon. Buzz is shown deploying a solar wind collector and saluting the American flag. This successful journey gave the U.S. a huge step ahead in the space race.
I'm going to step off the limb. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Columbia, this is Houston, AOS, over.
Houston, Columbia on the high gain, over.
Roger, the EVA is progressing beautifully. They're setting up the flag now. I guess you're about the only person around that doesn't have TV coverage of the scene.
That's all right, I don't mind a bit.
They've got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and stripes on the lunar surface.
Are you getting a TV picture now, Houston?
Neil, yes, we are getting a TV picture. You're in our field of view now.
I'd like to evaluate the various paces that a person can traveling on the lunar surface. You do have to be. All right, you do have to be rather careful to keep track of where your center of mass is. Sometimes it takes about 2 or 3 paces to make sure that you've got your feet underneath you. And about 2 or 3 or maybe 4 easy paces can bring you to a fairly smooth stop. Like a football player, you just have to put out to the side and cut a little bit.
In July of 1975, the space race started to come to an end with the first joint mission between both the United States and the Soviet Union. The mission was called the Apollo-Soyuz project, and its purpose was to conduct a series of experiments to further the knowledge of space.
After both of these spacecrafts landed back on Earth, the space race was effectively over and with a U.S. victory. However, it was a victory for everyone due to everything that was discovered about our amazing universe.